Awesome. Thank you. I'm Chandler Allphin. I'm a data scientist at Adobe with a passion for DevOps. The reason that I'm here, really excited to be here. First time in Amsterdam, enjoying it so far. And I'm excited to talk about Vault as a shared service. So I gave a similar talk at HashiCorp last year, but more around our architecture, why we went with Vault, the decisions that were made, a little bit about why we ended up purchasing Enterprise and kind of the scale that we needed. After that talk, I got a lot of questions from people asking, okay, that's all great, but why as a shared service? Why are you able to keep up with the scale with some of the native features of Vault? And so I thought it'd be good to put together a talk on running Vault at large scale and as a shared service. And I think this will speak to a lot of maybe the bigger organizations out there. But also is good as kind of the talk that we just listened to, going from startup to enterprise and making that jump. Before I dive too far into my talk, I just wanted to kind of talk about the dynamic of Adobe. I don't think I need to explain to anyone what Adobe does or whether you know us for PDF or Photoshop or Creative Cloud. Whether you're a fan of our subscription model or you're not, I don't really care. I'm not a salesperson, but I want from this slide, what I need you to grasp is that we are a company of acquisitions. And so we started, back PDF was our thing. Now it's kind of a different dynamic. We have, too fast. Okay, that's fine. So we have a ton of acquisitions that have come into the company, and that kind of makes my job a little bit more difficult. So I work on the core services team at Adobe. We look across the organizations, see what services, technologies, tools that people are using, and figure out, does this make sense to run as a shared service? So when we spin something up, it's for hundreds of teams, and we have to look at a very large scale and see, does it make sense? Does secret management make sense as a centralized service? That was one of the first projects that they gave me as I started at Adobe as a software engineer, was take a look at our software management and see if this makes sense. So goals of my talk, I wanted to start and just kind of share our success story, what's been good about Vault, where we're at today, running it as a shared service, some of the decisions that we made, and then key wins. But the bulk of my talk is I want to talk about our lessons learned. That's really what a lot of, after my talk last year, I had a lot of questions of how are you doing this as a shared service? So I'm going to be a little bit revealing up here and just talk about kind of the pitfalls that we had, what we would potentially do differently, because at the end of the day, we're all trying to tackle the same things. And we've learned a lot of things running this as a shared service and are learning even more as we continue to develop. And then I'll finish with a demo. I want to be, full disclosure and set expectations right. I know there was yesterday, someone open source code as their demo, super awesome. That's not going to happen, so I'm sorry. But it's really the demonstration that I'll be giving, it's not so much about the code that's written, it's really just some Jenkins and Python jobs that are working together, but it's more the process of automating policy management in Vault, which if you're familiar with Vault is a little bit of a pain point. And so I want to talk through kind of the decisions that we made there. Hopefully. Okay. So challenges in secret management. This was, back 3.5 years ago when we were really looking. I first joined Adobe. These were the things that we were looking to do. Now I'm hoping, there we go. The first one, kind of by far, was we were lacking this company-wide solution. Obviously, it's not that we didn't have a secrets management solution. It's that we had several, 10, 15, 20. All teams were doing a lot of different things, and we didn't have a central place where all of our audit logs were going into. We didn't have a great policy management. When auditors came and asked questions about this application and the secrets that it has access to, we ended up tracing down teams and looking for ways that we could answer their questions. So what we really were searching for and hoping for was a solution that could handle the large scale of Adobe and fit all of the different use cases, and that's what we found with Vault. I'm not going to go in depth of all of the what all we looked into and all the tools that we tried out, but by far, Vault was the one that was kind of head and shoulders above the rest. Oh, thank you. Perfect. Okay, so large-scale distributed multi-cloud. I think these are all things that we're familiar with. As Adobe, we have a lot of infrastructure in AWS, and then a partnership with Microsoft comes out. Adobe hearts Microsoft, and so of course we're in Azure. We also have our own data center. We have to be this distributed, multi-cloud, hybrid cloud environment at a large scale. So for us, it's not good enough to say our secret management solution is going to be KMS with S3 encrypted buckets. That doesn't work. We have to be able to have a cloud agnostic tool. In steps HashiCorp tool set, right? It just fits our needs really well. And then large scale is the big piece there, is being able to scale up to what our experienced cloud is expecting. Secure introduction with microservices. I think Armand did a really good job kind of just walking through what we're all trying to tackle here is moving from monolith applications. Some of it's more difficult than others, getting rid of those crusty applications into a more microservices architecture. But figuring out a secret management system that could tackle the secure introduction dynamically, securely, but not also be platform specific. We couldn't rest our morals on, hey, we're on Kubernetes, so we can leverage this specific tool within Kubernetes. We kind of live at Adobe with the thought from our lead architect. I'm sure he didn't come up with this. It's probably something he stole from somewhere. But every technology decision with time is a bad decision. And so we can't marry ourselves to just one system. We have to be able to have our abstraction layers and our pieces in place so that if ever we need to drop whatever scheduler or orchestrator we're running with and move to something else, that we're able to do that. Wide variety of use cases. This kind of goes to being a company of acquisitions. With every new acquisition, it was just announced that Adobe purchased Magento. And that was all news for us. And so now it's reaching out to that company and figuring out, okay, what opinions do you have with secrets management, for example? What things are you using now, and how can we help you get onto our infrastructure? If we have this limited use case and you have to integrate with us in this one way, then they're going to kind of laugh at us and not be as willing to move over. So we needed a tool that was flexible enough to fit a wide variety of use cases. So where we're at today, we deployed Vault, started with open source, quickly realized that we needed enterprise for replication purposes. We also leveraged the HSM functionality. We like the disaster recovery functionality, all of that good stuff. We've been running Vault Enterprise for a little over a year now. Very happy. We have 12 replicated clusters, Azure, AWS, private data center. Things are going great. We're working very closely with HashiCorp to continually improve this. It's not a perfect setup by any means, but it's accomplishing what we were trying to do. We now have a centralized place, a system that's highly available, replicated across multiple clouds. And when our auditors come and ask for a specific application, what secrets that has access to, we can go to one location and pull the logs and show exactly what's happening. And it's a huge win for us. I talked about wanting to go over key wins. I think there's a lot. Policy management has been a big win for us, being able to better control what policies are out there and how people are rotating their secrets, how people are distributing their tokens to their applications and so forth. One key win I wanted to point out here, which maybe doesn't seem as key right to you in the crowd, but for us, we had an orchestration tool, we had schedulers, we had this microservices environment, and I could have drawn that all up with a really complicated diagram, but what my point is, we have secrets, we're trying to get them to the end application, and Vault is kind of the tool that just fit in really nicely for us to fill that gap. And so going through this Mesos Marathon, DCOS, complicated approach, is able to securely inject secrets. Our teams were happy. They were centrally located, so we took the burden of introducing secrets to their applications away from them. But that's not the key win. The key win came when my upper management comes to me and say, hey, we're really sorry, but kind of ramp up your team because, potentially we may be moving to a different orchestrator, a different scheduler, and we're taking a look at these things. So what's all the changes we're going to have to make with Vault and ripping things out and all of that? What do we have to do? The key win for me is, we have a very easy abstraction layer. We're going to change 2 API calls, and then it handles it just fine. And so because we had centered ourselves in this centralized shared service and all teams were consuming of it, our engineering teams didn't have to worry about a thing. Our whole scheduler is changing, but yet they don't have to do a thing. It's just a couple API calls that we're changing, and that was a key win for us. So enough of that. From key wins to lessons learned. That's really what I want to focus on in this talk, because there were a lot of lessons learned, and this is definitely kind of like standing up here and exposing. No one likes to talk about all the pitfalls and the mistakes that they made, but we learned a lot. We started a good 2.5 years ago with Vault, and it was a different dynamic back then than it is today. So I want to talk to kind of some of the things that we learned and kind of where we're going from here. I thought about it last night. What I really could have done with this talk is stand up, say, Vault secrets, running Vault as a shared service, use namespaces. That's with Jeff talking about it yesterday. Really, a lot of the pain points and the lessons that we've learned are solved by what's coming soon, right? We don't have any timeline exactly on that, but according to Jeff, it's coming soon. Namespaces is a big deal, and I'll talk through why. So this slide's going to seem really weird at first, I'm sure, as Vault is today. But when we first started looking at Vault, rewind 2 years ago, it was, okay, we have these mounts. Vault's very Unix-based, and so we're just going to have this one mount. It's going to, for example, be a KV store, and we're going to build all of our teams off of this one mount, and we're going to control policies to them through ACLs. They're going to be able to build out their own tree. We can then develop more policies around what they have in place, and it's going to be great. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to have multi-tenant or single-tenant mounts, because then we're just handling configuration for several mounts when we could do the same thing with one. That all seemed to make sense until GDPR hit. And now we have these multi-tenant mounts, and every team has different needs for GDPR and where they can have their data. And so HashiCorp's response to that was mount filters, but that doesn't help us, right? Because we're on a multi-tenant mount. So big recommendation that I had is, and this is very straightforward. I don't think anyone today looking to start on Vault would go with a single tenant mount, or maybe you would. I would highly recommend not. Another thing that dropped was the KV store. Version 2 of the KV store. Now we have version secrets. Super excited. Like 5 minutes after the release dropped, my Slack channel was blown up with people saying, hey, this release just dropped 5 minutes ago. When do we have it in production? I'm like, well, we'll take a look and see. Unfortunately, there was breaking changes in the API of the version 2 KV store, the way that they had to architect it. And so when you're on a multi-tenant mount, you can't really just upgrade the mount and then you're fine, because there's breaking changes involved. So migrating everyone over to a single tenant mount became very important to us. Multi-tenant mount, single tenant mounts with mount filters, and being able to do more than just that with the KV store, but also with auth backends and transit, any secrets engine really that you're using would be our recommendation. And really this is table stakes at this point with namespaces, because now you have a namespace you can give your tenants, and they can use that and do whatever they want within it. They can create their own mounts and create their own filters, and you're able to delegate that out. The next big thing for us was just developing a self-service system. This also seems maybe something like, okay, shared service 101, right? When you're standing up a shared service, you really need to have it self-service as much as possible, or else you're going to run into a bottleneck. For us, and kind of the dynamic at Adobe, we didn't grow as organically as we wish we would have. We started looking at Vault as an option for us, and we stood up this beta service. And we told our developers, hey, this is beta. Don't take it to production. This is beta. We're taking a look. We're looking at Vault Enterprise. Of course, engineers, they find something that they like. They do some little tweaks and loopholes and networking, and all of a sudden, applications are in production using our Vault beta service. And we're standing there thinking, okay, now how do we productionize this with 40-plus teams banging on the door saying, we want to onboard and use it. So I showed the slide back of our architecture and where we're at. That's how we were running Vault, but we didn't have a great self-service method. What we had was, can you submit a ticket? Okay, go to a Jira queue and submit a ticket. If you can imagine any swear words you want in whatever language you want, that's what I heard back when I tell my engineering teams, can you go submit me a ticket to onboard to our service? They don't like that, especially I don't like that. My team doesn't like that because we're the bottleneck at that point. So how do you develop a self-service system for onboarding to Vault? That was our kind of pain point. How do we get to that point, especially with all the functionality that Vault gives? You can leverage Vault for TLS. You can do SSH signed certificates. You have a basic KV store. You have the transit backend. You can manage AWS, federate your AWS credentials. Every single use case was different, and we couldn't really develop this one-stop, a web page where they go click a couple buttons and it provisions, because we were supporting so much functionality. So our recommendation and where we've gotten to today is we're stepped back. We have the basic functionality that we feel like all teams need, and that's your self-service portal that you can get provisioned. If you need anything past that, then come talk to us, and that's when it involves a ticket. This is also something that's solved with namespace, and we're extremely excited about it, because now I can go ahead and still configure and automatically provision their namespace and grant them access to mount, create, do whatever they want within that namespace, and no longer am I worried about exactly what do you want to use this for. As long as I have the higher level ACL policies in place to control to a point, they're kind of within their own little parameters. It's a huge feature that's dropping. Next piece was kind of the new functionality. I don't know about you guys, but it's like every time I turn around, HashiCorp has a new release, and it's new functionality that I'm trying to learn about. And I find out about the release from my Slack channel telling me, hey, we want this. Can you get it into production tomorrow? And we're learning about the functionality as it's coming out, working closely with HashiCorp to kind of get some insights on what's coming. But this is another piece that it was like you have this whole full feature-esque, product. Teams are used to running it as an open source tool, as their own team. They have the root policy. They don't have to worry about coming to a team. Now they're forced to use a centralized service, and they don't have all of that availability. This was a pain point for us, and it again came down to maybe limiting our engineers a little bit more, letting them know that, hey, we're going to support this portion, but if you want something else, we're going to have to have a conversation. Again, namespaces, this helps me out quite a bit because they can now explore the new functionality without creating me a ticket. I don't really want them to come talk to me even. They can go and they have their own little demo environment that they can play around in. Best practices, probably not way straightforward, but something that was exposed to us is you have a lot of functionality, teams that are very excited to use Vault and, again, are banging on the door, and then they come to you and say, well, how should we set this up? We point them to a best practices guide, and, well, that doesn't work for us. When you're talking about so many teams, best practices almost became the limiting feature of, well, that doesn't work because we have our environment set up in a different way. So best practice guides, having those better in place was something that we could have benefited from, and now that we have them in place, it reduces a big portion of the requests that we get in and the meetings that we have to sit through. Last one, and probably the most important piece, and I think everyone kind of deals with this to a point, is our policy delegation. You have onboarding, and here's, put yourself in our customer team's view. They've just gone through a fairly painful process. Now, I'm over-exaggerating. It's not that painful, and we automate it to a point. This is definitely not the state we're in today. It's a nicer process for our teams. But back when they'd gone through this painful onboarding process, and now they've got everything, they've created their secrets, they've got a couple app roles, and they're chugging along. They don't want to come back and talk to me, and then they get a new application, and they think, okay, I just need to create a policy, give this policy, get it mapped to an app role in the environment, and they come and say, can you just point me to documentation of how I can do this? And I let them know, well, you don't have access to. Again, submit me a ticket. Well, now we're past the point of them swearing at me. They're making fun of my mom. They're asking me to meet them outside, and I'm like fearing for my life, right? So we had to get past this point, and we didn't stay in a stage where policy delegation or creation of policies could remain in the ticket structure for very long. So that's kind of what I want to demo today, and I want to kind of preface it with, it's not perfect, and there's a reason that we would never really want to open source this, because it's very specific to kind of how we're doing it. We have very specific kind of naming structures and how people can create policies and not create policies, and a lot of kind of string parsing. It's not pretty, but we're so excited because it got us to a point, and now with namespaces, a lot of that can go away, but we can leverage the same type of functionality to now manage our namespaces. So I really think that I significantly prayed to the demo gods, but we'll see. I'm doing this demo over conference Wi-Fi and VPN, so we'll see how it goes. There's not really a whole lot to it, so hopefully it works out. So I've got this unicorn. Okay, I don't know if people can see that. Yes, no, maybe make it a little bit bigger. Is that okay? All right, okay, I'm getting some thumbs up. So I'll kind of go through the files in here. Again, this is kind of specific, but this is the thought process that we went through, and something that I would recommend when you're looking at policy delegation and then maybe namespace delegation, or after the onboard process has taken place. So we created this repo. The thought being, okay, delegating policies not being a thing really stinks. So how can we make this policy as code, right? And kind of that buzzword, and get all of our policies into a repo so that now teams know what their policies are, it's very explicit, and they can just create as pull requests. Well, even with 40 teams and hundreds of policy changes, even just looking at a pull request and merging it in became a big headache. And so we went from, okay, let's plug in some Jenkins jobs, some Python magic to do a little bit of inspection into what they're requesting, and how can we automate this as much as possible. So we have them define an approvers file. Part of your namespace, or poor man's version of namespacing, give us an approvers, and normally it's 3 or 4 for this demonstration. I'm saying, okay, I'm the approver for Unicorn team. We have a team at Adobe, let's say, that's Unicorn, and I'm part of Unicorn engineering, and I'm the approver for any changes that happen within this directory. This directory is kept in a large repository in GitHub, and that's what we treat as exactly what our master is looking for, exactly how our policies are represented in our Vault environment. We then have cost center. This isn't super important to what I'm trying to demonstrate, but I wanted to show it. We needed a way to show, especially when we have several teams, several organizations, to be able to show, hey, Creative Cloud is using this much of our service, and here's their cost center, so we can maybe start cost show back or billing back. And so we have our logs that are centralized, and every log is coming in with a path, so it was simply mapping paths to cost centers, and then creating a simple lookup table in Splunk and getting that over to our business intelligence team. So we have this cost center. They onboard. They're automatically given that, hey, this mount is mapped to a cost center, and it's being billed back to the team Unicorn. We then have this mappings file. So this mappings file is not known by Vault as nothing specific, but it's just a place to keep track of what policies are mapped to what, in this case, LDAP group. So let's take a look at this policy. I've got the Unicorn engineering LDAP policy, and it's granting access to the engineering folder. Again, this is very, very, policies 101 in Vault, but all your CRUD capabilities that are being granted to this LDAP group, and then also they have the ability to read their own policy. So that's being granted, and then that's just a policy that exists in Vault. That's not mapped to anything, doesn't grant anyone access. So we needed a way in a mappings.yaml file is where we store it to map and say the Unicorn engineering admins team or LDAP group has access to this policy. We do the same thing down below in the operations. So operations teams, SRE teams, let's say, they will have a different approvers list defined, or maybe they don't. It really depends on the team. I have the approvers Feathers. Don't make fun too much because that's an actual username, and he's here today. But I think Feathers represents him well. So we have an approvers.yaml, and so if any changes are made in the unicorn_ops folder, it's going to wait for the approver at Feathers to give the okay. Same thing, cost center, mappings file, and operations, HCL, policy file, all the same. Okay, so this unicorn team, they've been created. They have no application roles. So let's say they've just recently been onboarded. They didn't request anything. They've built out their KV store now, and they have a new application. This new application needs access to a specific secret down the tree. This is something that our Vault admins would never know. It's specific to them, but it's going to be new app user 1 secret, and the only capabilities it needs is read. If you can imagine all the different iterations of things that we can see from 100+ teams, we get these all the time. So they needed a way to create it themselves. So they have this new app, and they're gonna add that HCL file to new app.hcl as a new policy that should be committed to Vault. Now, because they've created that policy, doesn't do them any good unless they have some type of a mapping saying that this token role, this app role, whatever it may be, needs to be mapped to the policy. So they're going to go and edit their mappings file and say, instead of an LDAP group, we now have a token role that's going to be called new app user, and it's going to be mapped to the policy that I'm just creating. I'm not able to do this by default. I can't delegate this access for him to write it directly to Vault as it is today. Sys policy is not something I can delegate securely. And so they're able to now create that, but then they come to a point that, well, okay, I've created this token role, and it's mapped to a policy, but now I need some way to get it into my configuration management tool. Okay, historically that happens with our SREs now, so they'll be the ones that need to have access to just create this token and get it into our Jenkins job or our Salt environment, wherever it needs to live, to securely introduce it to the application. So they've got these paths that need to be added to some kind of policy. One of the LDAP policies, they're going to throw it in the operations team so that they now have access to create a token. It's granting them read access to that one specific secret within engineering, but they're okay with that because it's their operations team, and they also have access to read the policy new app. So we'll go ahead and save that, and then it just needs to come through as a pull request. So we'll go ahead and add that, commit it for adding a new policy and role, and then do a git push origin. So that's going to push to our master branch, and they're saying, okay, this is my policy as code. I know exactly what my environment's doing. It's very explicit, and so I would like to push this, and hopefully it's going to come through. Maybe. Thinking. Live demos are awesome. Okay, so I've got this request. I'm going to do a compare and do a pull request on this. And now where we were at is every pull request that comes in needs to be looked at and make sure everything looks good. It needs to be merged manually into this repo, and then it gets provisioned. What we've kind of moved to is just Jenkins jobs that are looking at this, are triggered with any new pull requests, and it's reaching out now and it's saying, okay, this new policy is asking to be created. Is it granting access to anything that should be outside of Unicorn? Is it, it's doing string parsing, making sure that everything looks correct. It's syntax checking, making sure that nothing's going to break Vault. It's actually spinning up a Docker Vault that's completely separate, just in dev mode, and it's taking all of our policies and it's writing them all to this Docker Vault. So now we have this replication that we can just play with, and then it's just testing all of these changes to make sure that everything looks good. And I'm praying that this finishes and our Jenkins little test environment that we stood up actually works. But once it's done all the syntax checking, it's going to come back and let me know, hey, I've ran this check, everything looks good, and these are the changes that I would have made. If you think about it, it's like a poor man's Terraform plan type thing, and it's not coming back, so that's great. What's that? Yeah, so yeah, I'll log into Jenkins. I have Chris, one of my coworkers, taking a look. Hopefully it comes through for us. I have this kind of test environment that's stood up and allowing us to run this. It's been a little bit slow. Okay. @Feathers is running a retest for us. Let's see. Okay. If not, I can just speak to it. But yeah, so cloning the repository, running this Docker Vault, you can kind of see as it's running. Let's see this retest if it goes through. Okay, replicating the active config to Docker. It's doing all of this verification for us. And then if everything goes through, it's not going to merge it to Vault or make any changes because I don't want it to. No approvers have given approval. It's just doing the syntax check. It should come through. And okay, @Feathers, good job. Retest worked. And the new policy that it's adding, it's telling me, okay, these are the changes. Now, again, this is poor man's version. It's not pretty, but it just gives us a version of what's happening. So because I'm an approver for some of those files, I'll go ahead and add my approval. If I can type in front of all of you. So I'll go ahead and comment, and this is going to kick off. I guess I can show this as well. The same type of Jenkins pipeline that's coming through. But now it's this policy merger, so it's going to go and take a look and say, okay, what files were changed? And it's going to iterate and recursively call back through to see this file that's changed, is Allphin in all of the approvers files? If he's not, then we're going to deny it. And so I changed 2 files that I am an approver for, so it should come back and tell me, yes, 2 of these files are approved, 1 of them is not, and it's waiting for @Feathers to give the approval, and then this will be merged in. And okay, good. Look, it's going. This should be fairly straight. So it should give me something that kicks back, and it's going to fail. So we might be out of luck here. No, that's what we expected. What am I saying? Okay, so it's going to fail. It's waiting. Still waiting for approval here. It shows that it's been approved on all the others, but it's waiting for approver on the Unicorn Ops. So Feathers is going to go ahead and give us an approval, and we're going to run through the same thing. This time, it's going to check all of these files, make sure that they're all approved, and then it should just be merged directly into Vault. So not a whole lot behind the scenes. This maybe seems very straightforward, but for us, this automates it now. We're totally, now I'm out of the ticket game. My teams aren't responding to tickets because it's just fully being done here, and it's a pipeline. It's a poor man's version of namespaces. Once namespaces drops, I don't think we're going to have to rip too much out. Hey, okay, so we can see the approval went through. It's now merged. I should be able to go to my Vault and do a read on this new app and see that policy that I just wrote that took no Vault admins to look at was verified, it was written to Vault, and now it exists there. I now can go ahead and have my ops team create a token that's going to be given to my application, and everyone's happy because no ticket was created. So this was a big deal for us. Oh, thank you. We really, for us, we ran into this backlog and we became the bottleneck. No one likes being the bottleneck, but this got us out from being the bottleneck, and we're hoping that when Jeff says soon, that namespaces is coming relatively soon, because I think it solves a lot of our issues, and we're really excited for it. So that's my talk. Thank you.